Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Nolan Drake, and for 17 years I was the man behind the curtain at Halcyon Systems. The quiet technician who kept everything running while executives took the credit and padded their bonuses. I wasn't flashy. I didn't crave promotions or praise. I built, secured, and maintained a tech infrastructure that powered a billion-dollar company. And I did it without complaint. Until they decided I was obsolete. It was a Monday. The kind of gray, slushy Ohio morning where the wind cuts through your coat and bites your bones. I was halfway through my third coffee when Daniel Klein, my boss, sent the message. Meeting in my office. Urgent. Bring your laptop. I didn't need to read between the lines. I'd seen the signs weeks ago. My admin access had been quietly reduced. System alerts rerouted. Emails about core upgrades that used to land in my inbox now went to Stephen and Haley, kids I'd mentored myself. Still, I walked in calm, nodding politely to Vanessa from HR who sat, lips pursed like she already regretted being there. Nolan, Daniel began, his voice slick and soulless, as part of our organizational restructuring, your position is being eliminated effective today. I stared at him. Not in shock. Not in anger. Just with the slow, settling weight of a truth I'd hoped wouldn't come. He didn't flinch. Vanessa handed me a manila envelope, exit papers, severance agreement, the works. I understand, I said, my voice as steady as my hands. You'll need to clean out your desk by end of day, Daniel added, like he was doing me a favor. I nodded once and left without another word. Back at my cubicle, the silence was thick. Eyes peeked over monitors but darted away when I glanced back. These were people I'd trained, coached, helped when their code wouldn't compile or their drives crashed. I picked up the small cactus I'd kept alive under fluorescent lights for over a decade. My daughter Emma gave it to me in 5th grade. She's in law school now. Bethany from marketing approached, her face red and jaw tight. Nolan, I just heard. This is insane. You practically built this company. I offered a small smile. Companies don't remember who built them. Just who can be replaced. I walked out with a single box and years of knowledge they'd never recover. Not because I was irreplaceable, but because I was meticulous. I didn't just build systems, I left breadcrumbs. Audit trails. Quiet redundancies. Proof. Daniel stood outside his office watching me go. No handshake. No goodbye. Just silent victory. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had every reason to smile. Because I'd seen this coming. And I was ready. 17 years is a long time to invest in anything. A marriage. A home. A life. And Halcyon had been all of that to me. I'd started when Emma was still in pigtails, when our server rooms buzzed like beehives and the cloud was just a buzzword. Through 3 CEOs, 2 acquisitions, and 1,000 sleepless nights, I stayed. I refused offers from Amazon, Cisco, and 2 startups that would later IPO. I stayed because I believed in what we were building. Because I thought loyalty meant something. My wife, Rachel, always joked that the server rack in our basement got more attention than she did. She wasn't wrong. That Monday night, I sat at my home office desk with no alarm to set and no reason to wake up early. Rachel brought me tea and kissed the top of my head. You okay? She asked softly. I nodded. Just tired. She knew better than to push. I watched her walk away, her silhouette warm in the hallway light. I was tired. But not defeated. Not even close. I unlocked the bottom drawer and pulled out a matte black flash drive. You see, about 5 years ago, the legal department asked me to design an internal audit protocol. Something that would track access, trace approvals, and monitor internal threats. It was meant for compliance, a box to check. But I went further. With permission, I created off-site backups. They signed off. Then they forgot. I didn't. On that drive were hundreds of logs. Emails. Internal memos. Password histories. Everything the executives thought was buried deep within the bowels of the system. I reviewed the most recent files, scanning for one item in particular, Apex Vanguard Consulting. I'd found it months earlier during a routine scan. Recurring payments. Inflated invoices. A shell company registered to a strip mall in Utah. Curious, I traced its owner. Thomas Klein. Daniel's brother. I didn't say anything at the time. I just watched. For 6 months, Halcyon had been siphoning off small chunks of its tech budget to a ghost vendor. Payments matched software license renewals, legitimate enough to avoid suspicion, but inflated by 15% to 25% with every cycle. Quiet corruption. Low volume. High impact. And I had everything. Daniel hadn't just fired me to streamline costs. He fired me to bury the body. But I was still breathing. The next morning I got a text from Steven, one of my junior analysts. Heard what happened. Phillips already moved into your office. This is *T. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because by then I had a plan. Not revenge for revenge's sake. I wasn't interested in petty retaliation or embarrassing someone on LinkedIn. No, this was something else. This was about exposure. About precision. About making sure the people who thought they were untouchable realized just how fragile their ivory towers really were. I would show them that the quiet guy behind the firewall didn't just know the system. He was the system. And they just kicked the wrong piece off the board. I woke up Tuesday morning without the usual dull ache in my chest. No alarm. No morning traffic. No pretending to nod through another meaningless meeting while Daniel spewed buzzwords he barely understood. Instead, I sipped coffee in silence, reviewing the files on my encrypted drive. I wasn't looking for a fight. I was looking for truth. But the truth rarely comes quietly. What I found in the quiet of my home office, while Rachel read on the couch in the next room, would haunt me more than the betrayal. Because this wasn't just about Daniel Klein. It wasn't even just about the money. It was about how many people at Halcyon knew. Apex Vanguard Consulting wasn't an isolated blip. It was a pattern. A trail of breadcrumbs through years of subtle theft. With each click, a clearer picture emerged. Dozens of vendor accounts created through a shadowy approval loop, invoices signed off by Daniel or Brian Fenwick, Halcyon's CFO. Each invoice had small but consistent markups. Always tied to IT or consulting budgets. Always routed through departments where I'd once had full oversight, until they slowly, methodically stripped my access. At first, I thought Daniel was just a coward trying to cover for his brother's side hustle. But then I found Lakeside Dynamics. It was another vendor. Registered 5 years earlier. The mailing address led to a UPS box in Chicago. Services listed? Infrastructure consulting and data compliance auditing. Sounded official enough, until I cross-referenced it with Halcyon's financial approvals. Millions had passed through that name. The registered owner? Patricia Fenwick. Brian's wife. My hands tightened into fists over the keyboard. This wasn't corporate negligence. It was a multi-layered embezzlement operation, masked in technical jargon and approvals that only insiders would know how to hide. The fraud was woven into the foundation of Halcyon itself, and I had spent 17 years unknowingly supporting it. They didn't just use me. They used my work to get away with it. By noon, my plan was forming. First, I wouldn't go straight to the board. Too risky. A fired employee reporting fraud is easy to ignore. I needed someone who still had their ear. Someone I could trust. I thought of Robert Malloy, a former board member and now emeritus advisor. Years ago, we'd worked closely on a data integrity initiative. He was old school, sharp as a knife, and not afraid to ask tough questions. I found his personal number in a dusty email archive and sent a short, cryptic message. Robert, it's Nolan Drake. Need 15 minutes of your time. Confidential. Urgent. You'll want to hear this. While waiting, I created a fake internal Halcyon email account using a sandbox domain I'd once built for testing phishing protocols. It mimicked their naming structure perfectly. It was untraceable. I drafted a brief email with bullet points about Apex Vanguard's suspicious payments, omitting the family connection for now. The subject line read, Urgent, financial irregularities, immediate review required. I scheduled it to send at 9:15 a.m. on Wednesday, 10 minutes before the quarterly board meeting. It was bait. And Daniel Klein was the fish. Rachel peeked her head into the office. You coming to dinner? Yeah, just finishing up some cleanup. I lied. She smiled faintly. You look different today. How so? Like a man who remembered who the hell he is. She wasn't wrong. They thought firing me would erase me. They didn't realize I was the only one who knew where the bodies were buried, and I'd kept a shovel. Wednesday morning arrived crisp and cloudless. I sat in my parked car across from Halcyon's steel and glass headquarters. My laptop glowed beside me. At 9:15 a.m. the email went out. By 9:42 my phone rang. Daniel. I let it go to voicemail. Vanessa from HR emailed at 10:03 a.m. Mr. Drake, please cease all contact with Halcyon employees. Any further communications may result in legal action. Cute. I hadn't signed a separation agreement. That envelope from Monday? Still sealed. By 11 a.m. I was back at my bank, unlocking the safe deposit box I'd maintained for years. Inside were older backups, full documentation on system access histories, approval chains, internal memos, things that could never be faked. One particular log caught my attention. It showed Brian Fenwick requesting back-end administrative access to financial software 18 months ago, without any justification or corresponding project. That was right before the Apex Vanguard payments began. I leaned back in the vault's quiet chill and felt a chill crawl down my spine. This wasn't just fraud. It was planned fraud. Someone, maybe several someones, had built an entire criminal structure on top of the systems I helped design. They weren't just laundering money. They were laundering it through my legacy. By 3 p.m., my burner phone rang again. I answered this time. "Nolan, it's Brian Fenwick." His voice was calm, too calm. "We should talk," he said. "Talk about what?" I asked. "There's been a misunderstanding. I think we can resolve this professionally." "Is that what you call it? Siphoning off millions through your wife's shell company?" Silence. Then, "Look, transition periods are hard. But if you're looking for a generous severance, we can." "I'm not looking for money, Brian." "What do you want?" "I want the board to know exactly who they're dealing with." He inhaled sharply. "You're making a mistake." "No, Brian. You did. When you forgot who built your firewall." I hung up. 15 minutes later, Vanessa emailed again. The severance had magically doubled. With it, an attached NDA threatening criminal prosecution if I disclosed anything further. They were panicking. Good. I wasn't done yet. Later that night, I met Robert Malloy at a small Italian cafe 3 miles from downtown. He was older, his once black hair now snowy white, but his eyes still cut like knives. I handed him a sealed envelope and a USB drive. He didn't ask questions, just read in silence. 10 minutes in, he looked up. "Jesus Christ, Nolan. This isn't just a paper trail. This is AF*King mapped to a federal indictment. Thought you'd want to know before the board meeting." He nodded slowly. "Do you want your job back?" "No," I said flatly. "I want a system that doesn't punish the people who actually protect it." Robert studied me carefully. "We've got an emergency finance committee meeting Friday. I'll make sure this is on the agenda. But you'd better be ready for blowback." I smiled. They already came for me. They just don't know I was waiting. I went home that night, kissed Rachel softly on the forehead and held her hand while we watched TV. She leaned into me and whispered, "Whatever you're planning, just promise me you'll be safe." I kissed her temple. "I'm not planning revenge," I said. "I'm planning a reckoning." Thursday morning began like any other, but beneath its surface, the gears were turning. The email I sent Wednesday had done exactly what I intended. The fraud wasn't fully exposed yet, but the cracks had formed. And Halcyon's leadership was scrambling to patch them before the dam burst. I didn't need to do much more. The system was unraveling on its own. I started the day by sorting through my records one final time. My backup files were meticulous: old HR logs, IT access requests, network security reports, approval chains buried in forgotten shared folders. All legal. All backed by policy. All signed off by the same executives who were now pretending they'd never heard of me. I found something I hadn't noticed before. A file buried in a subfolder labeled Q2 forecast_archived. Inside, a set of email exchanges between Daniel and a consulting firm, Orion Strategy Group. The emails detailed the phasing out of senior-level IT personnel, without public disruption. The firm advised using vague terminology like restructuring or streamlining to prevent backlash. The earliest email? Dated 8 months ago. That was when they decided to get rid of me. And not just me, there were at least 4 other employees quietly pushed out during that period. 2 from compliance. 1 from internal audit. 1 from procurement. All positions that would have noticed the kind of fraud I'd uncovered. This wasn't some sloppy oversight. It was a purge. And I was going to make sure everyone knew it. That afternoon, I drafted an anonymous memo with a subject line designed to make board members' hearts stop. $4.5 million in fraudulent payments over 3 years. Involvement of current executives suspected. Inside, I laid out the full breakdown. A vendor fraud via Apex Vanguard and Lakeside Dynamics. Nepotism links between vendors and executives' family members. A suppressed oversight by strategic elimination of internal watchdog roles. Collusion between Daniel, Brian, and Jason Phillips. Evidence trails, time-stamped emails, account access logs, and registration documents. I didn't attach it just yet. This was the nuke. And I still had to see how far the preliminary grenade had shaken them. At 3:26 p.m., I got a text from Steven, my former protege. "Dude. Emergency finance meeting called for tomorrow. Everyone's panicking. Vanessa looked like she was going to cry. What's happening? I replied with 3 words. Don't get involved. Then I turned off the phone. This wasn't his war. He was young, sure, but not ready for this kind of crossfire. If I was going to burn bridges, I wasn't taking anyone down with me who didn't deserve it. I checked my email one last time before bed. Among the spam and noise was a name I hadn't expected. Jason Phillips. Subject, let's talk. I can help. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Jason was the Stanford-educated, smooth-talking consultant Daniel had brought in to modernize the department. The guy who smiled in your face while stealing the carpet under your feet. Now he was sweating, which meant he knew the noose was tightening. Friday morning arrived crisp and clear. I sat on my porch, coffee steaming in hand, laptop open beside me. I'd scheduled the full report to be delivered to every board member at 8 a.m. sharp. It hit inboxes like a lightning strike. By 8:17 my voicemail lit up with missed calls. Assistants. Legal reps. A few blocked numbers. I let them all ring. By 9 o'clock, Halcyon's emergency finance committee meeting was in full swing. I smiled. Because they were about to hear everything. At 9:32 a.m., Stephen texted again. Police are here. Daniel and Brian pulled into private rooms. Jason looks like he's going to throw up. HR's crying. What did you do? I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my personal email and found a message from Robert Malloy. Board meeting just ended. Hell of a performance. Committee demanding full forensic audit. Good work, Nolan. We're not done yet. I exhaled slowly, letting the cold October air burn my lungs. The reckoning had begun. By noon, Halcyon's general counsel, a woman named Patricia Graves, called me directly. Mr. Drake, she began. We need you to come in and clarify a few things you've submitted to the board. I've already clarified everything, I said. She paused. We would prefer to meet in person to discuss further cooperation. I'm sure you would. Mr. Drake, she said more firmly, this situation is extremely sensitive. We're placing several executives on administrative leave pending review. Your cooperation would be greatly appreciated. I've provided full documentation. Everything I know is backed up in 3 locations, 2 physical, 1 encrypted cloud. If anything happens to me or my family, it all goes to the SEC, IRS, and 4 news outlets. There was a long silence. Finally, she said, the board takes this seriously. They'd like to discuss next steps with you, including the possibility of a formal role. I smiled faintly. I'll consider it after the dust settles. Then I hung up. At 2:47 p.m. Robert called again. They cracked, he said. Brian confessed within 20 minutes of questioning. He's already negotiating a plea deal. And Daniel? I asked. Still denying everything. But we have email logs, access histories, invoice approvals. He's finished. Jason too. Claims he didn't know anything. No one's buying it. And the board? They're in damage control. But they're grateful. He paused. They want to bring you back. I blinked. What? Not as a systems analyst. They're creating a new Chief Information Security Officer position, reporting directly to the board. They want you in that seat. I didn't answer right away. I hadn't expected that. I'd set this all in motion expecting to expose, not return. But now, the idea that I could rebuild what had been broken, that I could create a new kind of oversight from the top down, that intrigued me. That night I told Rachel everything. She listened in silence, her hand resting over mine. When I was finished, she asked, "Do you want to go back?" I stared at the ceiling. I don't know. They didn't just fire me. They tried to erase me. They almost got away with it. But they didn't. No, I admitted. Because I knew where to look. Because I fought back. But still. Rachel's fingers laced with mine. Then go back and build something they can't corrupt. I kissed her. Because she was right. By Monday morning, the world had changed, and everyone at Halcyon knew it. The once bulletproof power players, Daniel Klein, Brian Fenwick, Jason Phillips, were now radioactive. The building buzzed with whispers of criminal charges, boardroom showdowns, and the mysterious report that had detonated everything. And right in the center of it all was a name no one expected. Nolan Drake. The man they fired. The man they underestimated. The man they couldn't ignore anymore. I parked in front of Halcyon headquarters at 9:55 a.m. sharp. This time, no cardboard box in my arms. No lowered eyes. No silent walk of shame. Just purpose. The security guard at the front desk, Ronnie, nearly dropped his scanner. Mr. Drake, he stammered. You're back? I nodded once. Here for a board meeting. He scrambled to print a badge. Welcome back, sir. For the first time in 17 years, I rode the executive elevator. The one that never stopped on my floor. The one I was never invited to use. At the top, behind double glass doors, 10 board members waited around a polished mahogany table. Robert Malloy stood at the end, nodding to me as I entered. The interim CEO, a woman named Ellen Werner, rose. Mr. Drake, she began, her voice clipped but professional. Thank you for coming. The situation you've uncovered is unprecedented. I remained standing. The forensic audit confirms your findings, she continued. Over $5.2 million diverted through fraudulent vendor relationships. We've suspended Mr. Klein, Mr. Fenwick, and Mr. Phillips. Criminal investigations are underway. She paused, then gestured to the folder on the table. The board has voted to create a new position, Chief Information Security Officer, with oversight authority over all systems, vendor contracts, and digital compliance. Reporting directly to the board. We would like to offer you this role. I opened the folder. Inside, a formal offer. Salary. Bonus structure. Stock options. Full authority across departments. I also saw what wasn't in there, and what needed to be. I have conditions, I said. Ellen blinked. Excuse me? Full audit power. Unrestricted access to vendor records. Independent budget control for tech infrastructure. And I get to handpick my team. Robert smiled faintly. He knew this wasn't just about returning, it was about rebuilding something that could never be corrupted again. Ellen cleared her throat. These requests are highly unusual. So was embezzling $5.2 million under your noses? I replied calmly. That happened because no one was watching. That ends now. Silence. Then Robert leaned forward. You have until noon to decide, I added, closing the folder. I have other offers. As I turned to leave, Ellen asked, Did you plan this, Mr. Drake? From the beginning? I paused at the door. I didn't plan to be fired after 17 years. Everything after that? That was just me doing my job. Identifying system vulnerabilities, and correcting them. I got the call at 11:47 a.m. sharp. They'd accepted every condition. That night, over dinner, Rachel toasted with a glass of wine. To bridges, she said. The ones that burned. And the ones we built back better. I raised my glass, smiling. To second chances. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about redemption. My first official act as CISO was to implement an internal whistleblower channel. Anonymous, encrypted, and independent of HR. Within the first week, I received 3 separate reports of questionable practices in other departments. Turns out Daniel and Brian weren't the only ones who'd been cutting corners. I launched a full internal investigation. No more shadows. The second thing I did was call Stephen into my new office. He stepped inside, eyes wide as he took in the view from the top floor. Wow, you really made it, he said, stunned. No, I corrected him. We made it. I handed him a new badge. Deputy Director of Information Systems. His jaw dropped. You're serious? You've got the instinct, the loyalty, the brains, but you've been playing in a broken system. I'm giving you a clean one. Don't waste it. He nodded, swallowing hard. I won't. 3 weeks later, the SEC issued subpoenas to Daniel, Brian, and Jason. News stations ran headlines like, Massive corporate fraud uncovered at Halcyon Systems. 3 executives under federal investigation. Their photos flashed across screens. Daniel with his smug grin. Brian looking defiant. Jason caught in the middle of a press scrum like a rat in a trap. And me? I wasn't in any of them. Because I didn't need credit. I had something better. Control. At night, I sat on the porch with Rachel, watching the leaves turn gold and crimson. The anger that once burned so hot had cooled into something sharper. Not bitterness. Just clarity. They tried to destroy you, she said once, and you turned it into your fuel. I shrugged. Sometimes a fire clears the dead wood. At Halcyon, things changed fast. Departments that used to work in silos now collaborated. Processes that had been manipulated were rebuilt from scratch. And the fear? It turned into something else. Respect. Not just for me, but for what I represented. People realized they didn't need to tiptoe around fraud anymore. Because someone at the top was finally watching. One afternoon, months later, I got a letter. No return address. Just my name typed. Inside, a single sheet of paper. You were supposed to disappear. Instead, you became the storm. I underestimated you. I'm not done. JP. Jason Phillips. From wherever he was hiding, probably overseas, he was still clinging to the idea that he could rebuild what he'd lost. Let him try. Because now, I'd built the firewall. And this time I made sure it could never be breached. By the time Halcyon's winter quarterly report hit the press, the company had stabilized, but the aftershocks of what we uncovered were still rippling through every corner of the building. 3 top executives were under active investigation. 2 board members had resigned for personal reasons. And over a dozen contracts with vendors were being terminated pending audits. The old guard had fallen. And now I was the firewall. Each morning I walked into the building with a sense of purpose that felt foreign but welcome. I wasn't just overseeing data integrity, I was safeguarding the entire foundation of Halcyon's operations. Some employees still looked at me like I was a ghost. A man they'd watched get fired. Discarded. Forgotten. Now I was in the one office none of them could reach without clearance. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about making sure what happened to me never happened again. Then came the email. An untraceable account. No IP history. Routed through a scrambled relay. Subject line, "You don't know the whole story." Attached a zip file. I didn't open it on the company network. I knew better. Instead, I isolated it in a sandbox environment. No outside access, no risk of breach. Inside were PDFs, call logs, and scanned documents. And what they revealed flipped everything I thought I knew on its head. The files showed that Daniel Klein had been pressured into cutting me loose. But not just by Brian Fenwick. By someone even higher. A name I hadn't expected. Ellen Werner. Interim CO. The same woman who'd offered me my new role. 6 months before I was terminated, she'd approved a restructuring proposal that explicitly named me as a redundant legacy system specialist. A label that made it easier to eliminate my role under new HR protocols. She wasn't just aware of the purge. She greenlit it. And worse, she benefited from it. One of the call logs detailed a series of communications between Ellen and Jason Phillips. They'd known each other long before he was brought on as a consultant. College connections. Mutual investors. Quiet back-channel emails. Jason wasn't just hired to modernize. He was brought in to execute a cover-up. A digital smokescreen while money changed hands and records disappeared. Ellen had played the board like a piano, crying accountability while rigging the game from behind the curtain. I'd taken down 3 players. But the conductor was still at the podium. That night, I sat across from Rachel, the documents spread out on the kitchen table. She read in silence, brow furrowed. Then she looked at me and said, "So, what now?" "I don't know," I admitted. "If I take this to the board, it explodes the whole company again. Investors panic. Stock dives. People lose jobs. But if you stay quiet, she stays in power. And the cycle continues." Rachel folded her arms. "Then you already know what you need to do." The next morning I called Robert Malloy. We met at the same cafe as before. Quiet booth. No recordings. No paper trail. I handed him a flash drive. He scanned through the files with the same practiced calm he'd shown the first time. This is even bigger than the first round," he muttered. "Ellen played all of us. She used my termination as a smoke bomb," I said. "To distract while Jason and Brian ran their fraud ring. And to protect herself from board scrutiny. If I hadn't fought back, none of it would have come to light." Robert leaned back. "She needs to be removed," I said. "And replaced by who?" he asked. "You." I shook my head. "No. I'm not built for boardrooms. I'm built for walls and defenses. But I won't work under her. Not anymore." Robert nodded slowly. "Let me take this to the finance subcommittee." Quietly. "If it checks out, we'll call a vote." Over the next 72 hours, Halcyon's legal team worked behind closed doors. A private forensic team verified every document, every link, every call log. And by Friday afternoon I got the message I'd been waiting for. Emergency executive session. Confidential. 4:30 p.m. I sat in the back of the boardroom this time, not as a witness, but as a weapon. Ellen sat at the head, still poised, still composed. Until Robert slid the folder in front of her. She glanced at it. Paused. And then everything changed. Her face went still. She didn't speak for 30 full seconds. Then she closed the folder, folded her hands and said, "This is absurd." Robert tilted his head. "So you deny having prior connections to Jason Phillips? I don't see how that's relevant. And you didn't approve the restructuring memo 6 months before Mr. Drake was terminated?" "I approve a lot of memos." "Funny," Robert said. Because the metadata shows it was drafted by Jason, but finalized under your login. She froze. The room filled with silence so loud it buzzed. I'm invoking my right to legal counsel, Ellen said. And just like that, the room understood. She was done. By Monday morning, Halcyon's interim CEO had resigned, citing personal and family health concerns. The board didn't even bother drafting a cover story. The truth had become its own reckoning. I was offered the role. CEO. It was poetic. Almost too perfect. The man they cast out now offered the throne. But I declined. I didn't want the spotlight. I wanted to be the shadow watching the gate. Instead, I proposed someone else. Maya Levesque, our internal ethics director, someone I'd quietly watched for years. Smart. Unbought. Unafraid to speak truth in a room full of cowards. The board agreed. Halcyon didn't need another empire builder. It needed a guardian. And Maya was it. That night, Rachel and I walked through our neighborhood beneath bare autumn trees. The air was crisp. Clean. You turned them all upside down, she said. They did that to themselves, I replied. I just made sure everyone saw it. Halcyon had a new leader. But I wasn't foolish enough to think that meant the war was over. Because corruption doesn't end when you cut off the head. It hides like rot in the walls. And it waits. That's why I stayed. Not for power. Not for money. But because I had built the system that everyone relied on, and now I was building something even more important. A new immune system for a company that had nearly destroyed itself from the inside out. My first 30 days as Chief Information Security Officer were a non-stop audit frenzy. My team uncovered vendor inconsistencies that no one had noticed in over 4 years. A few were innocent mistakes, but others? Intentional manipulation. Buried in the code. Disguised as line items. A recurring charge labeled Data Redundancy Analysis led us to a completely inactive account drawing $9,000 monthly since 2019. It traced back to a company registered to an intern's cousin, someone long gone. Just more ghosts. I restructured the IT team from the ground up. Promoted Steven to Director of Systems. Hired 3 specialists from outside Halcyon with no ties to the old regime. One of them was a former NSA analyst with a focus on financial forensics. Another came from a nonprofit known for rooting out cybercrime. I wasn't assembling a staff. I was assembling a watchtower. And then 2 weeks after Ellen's resignation, something happened that set off every alarm in my head. Steven burst into my office pale as paper. Nolan, we've got a breach attempt. Internal or external? Hard to say. It's coming from a masked IP, but it's using credentials assigned to Jason Phillips. I stood up so fast my chair slammed backward. That account was terminated. It was. But someone re-enabled it 5 hours ago. My mind raced. Where did the request originate? Not Halcyon HQ. Offsite. Somewhere in Europe. I knew exactly where. Jason Phillips had gone dark after the board fallout. Rumor was he'd fled to Portugal. No charges yet. His lawyer was playing the delay game, waiting for the headlines to die down. But this was active infiltration. We cut the access and immediately triggered a red team simulation, our version of a cybersecurity lockdown. All systems re-authenticated. All credentials reset. Every admin logged and reviewed. The breach was contained within 8 minutes. But the attempt? That was deliberate. And it wasn't just about data. Jason hadn't tried to access financial records or HR files. He'd gone for email archives, specifically mine. That night, back home, I stared at my monitor long after Rachel had gone to bed. Why my emails? What was he after? Then it clicked. The anonymous message. The one that had exposed Ellen's connection to Jason. The one that triggered her downfall. She hadn't sent it. He had. Jason Phillips, the same man who helped engineer the fraud, had turned on Ellen. And now he was trying to cover his tracks. But why help me? And why go back for more? I spent the next few days re-reviewing that original zip file. Metadata. Timestamps. Code stamps. Hidden macros. And buried deep in one of the PDFs I found something I had missed. A phrase in a footnote. Asset Epsilon 4 initiated under EVP Directive, 2017. That wasn't random. I ran it through our internal legacy document archive. It led to a confidential Halcyon pilot program proposal, long since shelved. It detailed an experimental AI-backed data compression system called Epsilon, intended to optimize file storage by 38% using proprietary pattern detection. The program had been shut down in 2018. Or so I thought. Because listed under key contributors? Jason Phillips, Ellen Werner, Brian Fenwick. And one more name, Arjun Venkataram. That name stopped me cold. Because Arjun was Halcyon's current VP of Strategic Development, and the only executive still standing from the original Apex scheme. I called Robert the next morning. He answered on the first ring. "I think we missed one," I said. "What do you mean?" "Jason didn't just flee. He's still connected. Still pulling strings. And Arjun may have helped him bypass system protocols during the breach attempt." "You have proof?" "Not yet. But I'm about to get it." With Robert's blessing, I launched a discreet internal audit on Arjun's digital footprint. What we found wasn't just incriminating. It was terrifying. Over the last year, Arjun had used his position to divert funding back into dormant R&D accounts, including a shadow server cluster labeled Epsilon Core. That program? Never shut down. It had been moved, hidden, modified. Arjun had been using it to compress and encrypt communication logs between executives, effectively creating a private, off-the-books data network. Jason's data, Ellen's data, and blackmail material on at least 2 board members. This wasn't just fraud anymore. It was corporate espionage, and it was live. The next night, I met Robert in a secured satellite office we maintained for classified investigations. I showed him everything: file trees, password logs, redirect scripts. He paced in silence. Then he said, "Arjun knew Jason would go down, so he kept the files as insurance." I nodded. "And now Jason's trying to erase himself from them." Robert ran a hand through his gray hair. "This is nuclear, Nolan. If we go public with this, the DOJ gets involved. We're talking RICO charges." "Then we go careful," I said. "We trap Arjun. Isolate Jason's connection. Seal the system. And flip the story before it leaks." "How?" "We bait him." Welcome back to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. We set the trap on a Thursday. I called it Operation Dead Code. The plan was simple, at least on paper. We'd simulate a breach into a fake data archive, using a dummy Epsilon file stored on a sandbox server. The file's metadata would suggest it contained sensitive board communications, some of which would appear to implicate current members in SEC violations. The bait: if Arjun took it, if he tried to move, delete, or reroute it, we'd have him. I watched from my console as the operation unfolded. Steven sat beside me, eyes flicking between data logs. 2 agents from the internal audit team monitored Arjun's device remotely, with full forensic capture enabled. At 2:13 p.m. it happened. Arjun accessed the bait file. Not from his work laptop, but from a secondary device connected to Halcyon's internal Wi-Fi, spoofing a guest network ID. He believed he was cloaked. He wasn't. The moment he attempted to open the Epsilon module, our trap activated. Screenshots, IP logs, file transfers, every keystroke. And most importantly, an outbound message queued from his device to an IP address in Lisbon, Portugal. Jason Phillips. They were still working together. Within minutes, Arjun was escorted to a private compliance room. He never returned to his office. By the end of the day, his access was revoked. His company phone confiscated. A formal criminal complaint filed. And me? I had what I needed to finish it. Friday morning, I submitted a final report to the board. Title: Operation Ghostwire, Internal Breach and Containment Summary. It was the end of the road. The chain was complete. Alan Werner greenlit the purge. Jason Phillips engineered the back-end manipulation. Brian Fenwick processed the financial trails. Daniel Klein provided cover under restructuring. And Arjun? Arjun was the vault keeper, the last guardian of all their secrets. Until I cracked him wide open. The board's reaction was swift. Robert Malloy called me personally that evening. "They've all been handed over. DOJ has everything. The FBI's been briefed." "You did it, Nolan." "I didn't do it for the board," I said. "I know," he replied. "You did it for the company." "No," I corrected. "I did it for me." Later that night, I updated my LinkedIn profile. Sometimes the systems you build betray you. Sometimes you rebuild them stronger. In the morning, my inbox was full of job offers again: 7-figure salaries, CTO titles, media interviews. I declined every single one. Because my work at Halcyon wasn't done. And more importantly, because power had never been the goal. 3 weeks later, a news article made the rounds. Federal indictments filed in $5 million Halcyon fraud scandal. Final executive caught in internal sting. Another read. Quiet genius who toppled Halcyon's empire declines CEO role, cites integrity over influence. I didn't even open them. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't need headlines. I had peace. And something better than revenge. Justice. One evening Rachel and I sat on the back porch, the spring wind brushing the trees gently. "You're quieter now," she said, sipping her tea. "I spent too long screaming inside," I answered. "Now I just listen." "To what?" "To what's next." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You still think about what they did?" "Every day," I said. "But not with anger." "With what then?" "With understanding. They thought I was the easy mark. The loyal guy. The one who wouldn't fight back." "But you did." "No," I said. "I outlived them." A letter arrived in my mailbox the next day. Plain envelope. No return address. Inside, a single typed sentence. "We were wrong about you. And you were exactly right about us." No signature. But I didn't need one. Jason Phillips had written me once more. Only this time it wasn't a threat. It was a surrender. I had Rachel burn the letter. Let it all turn to ash. Because ashes can't be used against you. And because I'd built something stronger than paper. A firewall of memory. Of lessons. Of scars. 6 months later, Halcyon was leaner, quieter, and finally, honest. The new CEO, Maya Levesque, ran the company with transparency and surgical discipline. Stephen had grown into his role, commanding respect and managing crises with skill. And me? I stayed in the shadows. Watching. Guarding. The system would never fall asleep again. Not on my watch. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.